Go. Hi, everybody. I'm David Kaye. I'm from the University of New Hampshire.
And I'm Hillary Haft Bucs from Western New England University in Springfield, Massachusetts.
And we're very excited to share with you something that we shared with our Divas group. We were assigned specifically to look into face-to-face teaching. Now, we first presented this, I think what, Hillary, about mid-June, somewhere around
yes,
there. And as everybody knows, that things have changed very quickly. A lot of added information, things that we had presented then, which we have now come to find out were actually not accurate, and other things that we thought were one way, we've discovered another. So we have since updated to the most current information that we've got, and we're going to take that opportunity to share with you exactly what it's going to be like to try to teach face-to-face. And of course, one of the questions we really had to ask ourselves is, can we still do it? We will address that question relatively soon. All right, and let's go ahead and get started.
What we do know, as you know, that this information is going to be constantly changing, so we're trying to stay abreast of what the latest research is showing, and also talking to doctors we know, such as my doctor, and we brought in public health specialists to an AFA session and asked them some of these questions. So surgical masks prevent spread by 70%, but because we're actors and acting teachers, a lot of us are not going to be using surgical masks because we want to be able to show our faces. N95 masks, 95%. Once again, I don't know how many of us will be actually using those in the classroom because they can be quite uncomfortable. And then cloth masks, which most of us have been doing in our everyday COVID lives, 50%. Shields are not a replacement for masks. This is new information for us because when David and I started this research, we were seeing that shields could be a replacement.
Actually, even at that point, they were saying they were even better because it blocked the droplets. But that was before all of the information about aerosol spread, because at that time, they thought that the aerosol spread didn't carry enough of the virus to be dangerous. That, of course, is now proven wrong. And as soon as we found out about this, I went out and bought a bunch of masks, and a bunch of shields. So if anybody is in need of shields, I'm having a fire sale.
Oh, great. Great. I want to try some different ones. One thing that was recommended to us at our session with ATHA was that it's good to have shields with a mask for safety. I haven't actually tried that one yet.
But they said that the shield, in that case, the shield mostly was protecting you from touching your face. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the big benefits.
My school, my institution, our registered nurse on campus who's in charge of the healthcare center designed a face shield specifically for our university, which does have a drop cloth around the neck. But there's still areas on the side that you can still have air escaping from. So in that respect, a mask would still be the safest with that shield. Aerosol can spread at least 15 feet and linger for 2 to 3 hours. This is really important information as we think about how we're going to be teaching face-to-face. David, can you take the next one?
Sure. Sorry, oops, we lost our share there. All right, we're back. Good. Yeah, and that was the information on aerosol, I think, is the thing that was the most concerning to most of us, and it's also been the area where we've been trying to get the most concrete information, because that's the critical part. The larger droplets, when we first thought that was the problem, that seemed to be so much easier to handle. Oh, 6 feet apart, we're good to go. But when all of the information on aerosol, it's like it really has made things much more difficult and complicated. And when you're starting to look at a 15-foot distance for safety, now we've really got some challenges on our hands, and now also like how long it can last. Those are really some of the critical information bits that we got through our AFA session with different medical personnel. I'm sorry, where did you leave off, Hillary? I was getting rid of
aerosol's not as potent.
Yeah. So actually, just before this, Hillary and I were talking about there's not a doubt being outside is the best because of the air circulation. You can see that the amount of time that the medical professions say that this is how much time it takes to circulate the air properly 3 times. And that is, they say that with a halfway decent system takes about an hour. Well, in most of our cases, we're probably not going to be able to have an entire hour between classes. So that's a challenge for us all to deal with. But now the question is like, can you move anything outside? And what are the rules if you move outside? And can you go with the social distancing, but no masks if you're outside? And Hillary and I have kind of come to this conclusion is that, you really need to check with what are the guidelines for your specific institution. You also may want to look at the guidelines for your state, and then also ultimately what your comfort level is. So just speaking for me, I am going to try to do as many classes as I can outside. I'm not quite sure what the noise situation elsewhere is going to be, so that's going to be a problem for me. But I do feel comfortable keeping everybody at distance, but no masks if I'm outside. But I'm going to continue to double check that because the institution may put the kibosh on that before classes actually start. Go ahead.
David, I wanted to share what I've been thinking about and trying to get some answers from my institution is that I've shared our research with the administration, and class turnover time is still 10 minutes between classes. Yep. And because I teach at a liberal arts institution, the classroom space that I'm using for my acting class will most likely be previously occupied by a completely different sort of class that might have their desks in a different configuration, where I have to come in and push everything to the side and create more of a studio space. And then how can I do that even in 10 minutes safely? And also the consideration of what's happening with the airflow in the space. One thing I'm requesting from the administration, if maybe classes, or at least the classes before my class, can end a little bit earlier so that I have time to get in there and clean. And I want to know if I'm even allowed to spray like with Lysol in the air. That's one consideration. Another one I'm considering is starting the class later. And then the third one is, at least for the first part of the semester, is meeting all my students outside. And seeing how much of that class we can take outside before we even enter the space.
Yeah, you can see the last thing on this particular slide is how much time you spend in that space together really is a major factor. My class normally meets for an hour and 20. Actually, I usually open the space 10 minutes before the class, and my students are strongly encouraged, and most of them do show up 10 minutes before class to begin warming up. So that's a full 90 minutes. And, as I reflect upon it, I'm going, that's probably too long to be in the space together. And I think most of the guidelines are saying that's too long to be in the space together. So I too am looking at ways to shorten the class. I had considered, like, could I take a break halfway through? But I don't think there's enough air circulation, quite frankly, to make that big of a difference. So I'm looking at shorter classes as well.
Great.
We obviously know that the more physical you got, the more that those droplets. So like that's, I'm saying, so like my warm-ups, I do Tai Chi as a basic warm-up. So I'm like, okay, good. That's pretty good. Matter of fact, I know when I'm coaching the Tai Chi, I usually say, please do not advertise your breathing. So I kind of feel like that's going to be a really great warm-up exercise in my situation. But of course, I have lots of others that are much more physically active. I'm just, I'm not going to do those warm-up exercises unless we're outside, in which case then I might be able to do that.
Same here.
Yep.
But I love your Tai Chi idea. I'm thinking about something like that. I might just end up doing some sort of Alexander quick warm-up and then a roll down.
Yep.
But not do the vocalizations that accompany that.
Right.
And I'm also going to be saving my more stringent vocal exercises for Zoom.
Yep. And of course, I mean, so many of our colleagues use yoga and have other things that are going to work really, really well for things that are not going to enhance heavy breathing. But, the forceful, this is going to be hard for all of us as acting teachers. At some point, we want our students to emotionally and physically connect. and emotionally, vocally connect, and that's going to mean some power. And we know that that is going to be problematic, but our hope is that ultimately we'll get to this a little bit later, that the masks will mitigate hopefully as much of that as possible, but it is going to be a factor. And this is something relatively serious, that singing is equal to coughing in the number of particles emitted. My guess is also like yelling, which you could easily have in any point in a scene, is again pretty much going to be the same as coughing. We had, in our first presentation, we had come up with a couple of thoughts on barriers. Matter of fact, I had put into motion to have a sort of a movable plexiglass barrier, essentially a 6x4 sheet of plexi on a frame that was self-standing. And again, information that has happened since then, because the aerosol is saying that that's really not going to be terribly helpful. It might mitigate a little bit, but it's not going to really do the job. This is an important thing. I think this came in the ATHA session, is that what we are telling you now, how much of it will be actually apropos in 8 weeks is anybody's guess. That's sort of the shelf life for information right now. So just know that we have to continually update. Hillary, you want to give us the bottom line?
Bottom line. Based on the information available at this time, there is no entirely safe way to teach a face-to-face acting class. And that being said...
Ooh, that's my cue.
Yeah.
So here is what we have collectively, and I mean collectively, it's not just Hillary and myself, but after at the conference, as well as several different groups that have been compiling information, vast SDC, who else am I missing in here? NAST, the Singing Association.
The Choral
anyway,
Association.
Right, we've tried to pull in as much, as well
as
the acting group that's preparing a white paper. So here's just what we've got at this point, if you are indeed having to teach face-to-face as well. We can just overlap on this. So once again, 6 foot space is the absolute minimum, and really that includes masks.
Yes.
And for some of you, if you really want to play it safe, that's indoor or outdoor. As you can see, on a personal level, some of us are making some different decisions for outside space.
Right, so this even means with 12 to 15 feet apart, it's still with masks if you're inside.
Make sure you got those wipes, because we're much more tactile, obviously, in an acting class. I know, like in my classes, the thing that probably is going to get the most touching are tabletops that we're using, as well as props, obviously. We're just going to make it part of our criteria after, not only after every class, but I'm probably going to do a wipe down, like between scenes, or basically anything where we're going to get hands-on things. I had considered doing gloves, but I'm not going to head down that path. I think I'm going to go down the wipe down instead.
David, take the next one too.
Right. So, many of us are going to be doing scenes that, or maybe they're scenes that we like to use because we know that they're really good and powerful and it's the right length and it's evenly distributed. We all know that it's a challenge to find those great scenes for your class that fit your criteria for what a good scene is for how you work. But I bet if you look at them, several of them are like, have a kiss in them or have other needs for physical contact. So now you're really having to ask yourself, how do I adapt these? And we'll go over a couple of these. But one thing that was mentioned in the session at ATHA is that if you do have to have physical contact, that includes you as an instructor for any particular reason. You just want to make sure that you are touching an area that the other person, the person who you're touching, that person would not have likely made contact with their own hands. So the face in particular is a bad place to touch, because that's the most likely place that they will touch, obviously their own hands. But if you're going to like a back shoulder or places like that, that's going to be reasonably safe places to make physical contact.
And as we were discussing before, allow as much ventilation as possible during your class. And what does that mean? If you have fantastic HVAC that refreshes the air 3 times in an hour, great, you're very lucky. But a lot of our classroom buildings are much older. So can you open windows? If not, maybe you have to really move your classroom somewhere else. I've had to have my classroom moved because I was originally put into a basement classroom. And then deciding whether or not you have to take it outside for at least part of it. For us in the Northeast, that window is very small.
Yep. I actually looked, because I'm in a, I moved mine out of my classroom space, which does have had a small window, but the room itself was only about maybe, I think maybe at the most 24 feet long by about maybe 18 feet wide. I mean, it was just barely big enough for my class in normal times. So I'm moving that class to our studio theater, which gives me a lot more space, but the studio theater is basically in a basement. And I checked in to say, like, can I run a fan? Could I, like, what could I, and basically the information at this point seems like just running a fan is not the same as circulating fresh air into a space. So, you know, you'd have to actually have a much more complex system, which you could do, but I doubt any of us are gonna have the tools to do it, where you actually have this big thing that goes in the door, that seals the space actually, and then you run fans that are sort of hosed into it. I mean, it's pretty complex. That's what it would take to really do the air circulation, but don't just put a fan and blow it, hoping that that will sort of dissipate things. It's apparently not going to do it.
And then as I said before, what we were told at the ATHA session is ideally 2 hours between classes to let the air refresh, minimum of 30 minutes. Many of us don't even have that. I'm hearing, David, that some departments overall have shortened their classes, at least so that there's space between classes. That's easier if you're working within the department. It's harder if you're following a class from a different department.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I'm thinking of starting outside when I can, or starting later than my scheduled class time if the previous person will not be ending early.
Yeah, you know, one good, I mean, I shouldn't say the good, but because so many classes have gone to completely online, at least for us, that's freed up space a little bit. So where, you know, if in normal times, it's so hard to move classes or change times. So fortunately, I'm not as pressured in as I would normally be. So I'm feeling, that's the one thing where I'm feeling a little bit better.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
The last thing, actually, Lionel Walsh shared with us a really great document. He's at the University of Windsor, where he combined in like the best practices from like Dance USA and VASTA and NATS, into one document that they're using for their institution. And I'm sure Lionel will be more than happy to share that with you. But one thing that we really wanted to grab from that I think came from that document was to go ahead and grid your floor if you can. One of my classrooms has got one foot by 1 foot tiles, so we kind of have an automatic grid. But on the deck of our studio theater, I'm going to go ahead and grid that. Now, right now, we've all gotten pretty good at sensing 6 feet. We've been doing it pretty well, but no matter what, it allows you to do a number of configurations at 6 feet very, very quickly if you've got yourself a grid. So it might just help move things along.
David, well, when we get to the grids, can you talk a little bit more like logistically about how we could actually grid the space? Because I'll be working in a space that's carpeted.
Gotcha, sure. Yeah, we can look at that. So I just brought this thing up because I'm in New Hampshire, and we actually did have a working group. I wasn't part of the working group that was looking at performing arts specific, both for performance and for teaching. And I only bring this up because you may want to double check to see if your respective state actually also had something specific for performing arts. And, you know, hopefully they're also staying very up to date. I mean, there's stuff even on this report that I captured from about a month ago that's now probably a little bit obsolete. But do check, because there's lots of places to get information right at home. So we just thought we would kind of lay out some grids to look at some setups part of it just to maybe just a reality check for all of us to kind of say like, all right, well, what does this actually look like? So, so this is a setup, as you can see, in a 20 by 30 space, sort of establishing a performance area. Now, I got to tell you that I went back and forth. I was like, well, and we don't have a super clear answer on this question. So if you got your two people that are in the performance area, so what happens when you have two new people step into that same space? And, you know, it's hard to say exactly, is there any space that is appropriate for any of us to be? We are mobile in our classes. We're not stationary. So, and I'm kind of approaching this that, you know what, we're masked. It's going to stay pretty contained to the individual. The 6 feet is at least to have immediate safety between you and another person. And so I think in some cases I'm comfortable with a setup like this, but I do have one if you're not comfortable with a setup like this. This is, again, same space, but configured if you wanted to put your playing space in the middle. And this is, again, this could accommodate this particular setup in a 30 by 20 foot space for 22 people. This is for just a smaller space, 18 by 24. So this is about the space that my class would normally be in. And I could actually accommodate up to 16. Now you can see though that is putting people right up against the wall. So this is a setup where I started to think like, all right, so in a lot of my classes, we pair up a number of times. And I started to think, does it make more sense to always keep a student with the same partner for that day, to not have them switching partners and not have them switching locations within the room? And I am thinking in my bigger studio spaces, because also like, if I can, I'm going to go up to our main stage where I've got a 40 by 40 stage. And I'm starting to think this could be the safest setup. So then if I do have two students that we need to watch, everybody just stays right where they are and we all just put our focus on those two particular students. Nobody actually moves for the most part from, you know, if you can kind of imagine a bit of an oval or circle around their space, everybody has their own large circle that they're operating in for that classroom. So that's a configuration that I'm thinking very strongly that I might go with, particularly when I'm in the bigger space.
So talk, David, a little bit more about what you have in parentheticals, because this is what we're both thinking about, even with this plan, which is something that I definitely want to take on myself, is how much does it really help if the aerosol is spreading?
And boy, that, you know, that's the $1 million question. And the only way the way, I guess, again, we are all going to have to kind of answer this question somewhat personally, because there's so many factors that we can't account for. What is the actual circulation in your room? I know, like in some of ours, we just have these blowers. So I can't control it. We won't either have heat or cooling in the building if those blowers aren't blowing. And I'm just assuming that's just going to spread stuff everywhere. So I think in some of our spaces that I'm in, it's just not going to make any difference. It's going to be everywhere. In my bigger space, I think I have a feeling that that's why I think in my 40 by 40 stage that I'm using as a studio, I think I have a much better chance of actually kind of localizing things, because there isn't like this sort of, there's not a really heavy duty air circulation there. I think these are going to stay kind of put. And I can get enough spread between the groups. I'm not going to get 15 feet, but I think I'm going to get enough that I can really minimize that aerosol spread. But I think you just got to look at the lay of the land of your particular space. And yeah, if I'm in my, quite frankly, if I'm in my 24 by 18 foot space with poor air circulation and blowers, I just don't think this makes any difference.
Right. Remember, those of you who are watching, our purpose here is for those of us who do have to teach face-to-face. It is definitely safer if you can teach online and then you're not having all these concerns, worries, and discussions. But there are many of us who have to figure out how to do this as safely as possible face-to-face.
And just as Hillary and I are doing, just as we're doing this is really a discussion. We do not have the definitive answers, but we're sharing with each other as best we can, and trying to establish what we think are the universal best practices, and in a lot of cases, what we think are our best practices. Because, boy, if there's one thing I can tell you, there's not a one size fits all for any of this.
No.
Got just one last grid, and then I'll address Hillary's question. So again, coming from Lionel's document that he sent us, which included the Leonardo da Vinci, person with their arms spread out. And he said, remember, if you're going on the floor, you've got to be thinking that you've got to have enough floor space for like a 6-foot tall person with their arms spread. So that's a good one. So this is a little bit to give you an idea if you are going down onto the floor, or if your course requires a lot of floor work. So this was 1, 2, 3, 4. I think this is a 20-foot by 20-foot space. I think, I'm sorry, maybe 30 by 30. But you can see how much how much room you really need if you're going to start putting people on the floor. So just remember that you need that space. Now, whether or not the fact that you might be projecting upwards is better or worse, I don't know. So Hillary, getting back to like, if you can't grid, or gridding is challenging. I mean, if best of all possible worlds, I would probably use spike tape if I possibly could. But it sounds like in your case, like where you've got like other people are using the class, it's probably just going to get torn up. You might just be able to just do spike marks along the the two sides, maybe just a foot long, enough so that they wouldn't get disrupted by the non-theater classes that are using that space or dragging tables or whatever. At least, again, it's really just a reference point for you as the instructor to quickly see and gauge. That might be plenty. Matter of fact, just talking about it, I wonder if that's all I really need even in my studio space.
Because I was thinking, do I need to get those circles that you see in the stores that, where the customer stands on that circle, leading up to the cash register.
Boy, that I mean, the advantage of the grid is, again, because you can configure in any way. So if you want to go to like a proscenium and you're that kind of thing, but again, if you're really working where people are working more individually throughout a whole class, having circles actually kind of makes a lot of sense.
Well, this is so helpful. Thank you. Okay.
So hopefully everybody will be very excited. You're in for a little fashion show, a mask fashion show. Now, our first slide had the shields up, and again, as we've said, shields are just not going to do the job. They certainly aren't going to hurt added to masks. They will help, but they are not a substitute. So we've been researching now for quite a while on what might be the best masks for our uses, particularly in acting classes. And of course, again, Nats, singing people, Vasta, have looked also at masks a little bit more specifically from that vocal standpoint, where in the acting classes, the visibility, we think is perhaps the more crucial point, but but we still need to vocalize, but that's sort of the problem we tried to tackle, is what would be the best to be able to see as much of the face as possible. This mask that's far to the left, I've ordered, but I have not got in yet. So I can't tell you, and we've tried to try these out as best we can. And I'm suspicious of it from a couple of standpoints. I have to assume it's gonna be really, really hard to breathe in that thing. All of them, a lot of the problems tend to be the chin, which is to say, if it connects to the chin and your nose, is that it pulls that thing off of your nose once you kind of really engage your face. So that's one of the areas that we've tried to look out for. Next to this is Victoria Caro, who's our costume designer and costume shop manager. Spent a lot of time this summer trying to devise and create a mask. She went through many, many prototypes, something that would maximize what we see and at the same time really allow for full facial expression with it not rolling off the nose or coming off the chin. I don't have that yet, and she is making them available in Esty, via Esty. Right now, she does not have any of them for sale, but she's hoping to get them back in, and she'll adjust that site. So you'll see that there's some for sale as soon as she's able to produce them. I just have to move us a little bit here. So we do have the Under Armour mask, or some of the athletic masks that are out there. We put those mostly just because they're really great for the heavy breathing and breathability, particularly for anything that's strenuous. But as you can see at this point, we can't get the two worlds. That is to say, comfort, breathability, protection, and see-through. Although I will tell you that bottom line, nothing's getting through that vinyl. So these have some of the benefits of a shield, which is they will certainly stop droplets dead in their tracks. So in that case, they're very strong. The harder part is whether or not you're going to get a good seal here and here. And finally, the clear mask, which actually both Hillary and I can show you. So we're going to put on our clear mask because we both got them. I got to take my glasses off. This is very exciting. And so you can see that the visibility is pretty good. It definitely, your ears have got to adjust to it. That is to say, what you hear is definitely blocking us. Breathability is not. I don't find it too bad. How do you find it, Hillary?
Well, one of the benefits of the clear mask is the technology they use. It's already hard to talk, by the way. Oh, what are we doing? But it doesn't fog.
Yeah, and that's such a key. You'll see some clear masks that are very flat to the face, and I would say that those are just going to fog up. You really need to have something with an arc to it, and an arch that gets it away from the mouth. You can treat it with, I think, beeswax. There's a couple of other. What's that?
And I think dish soap as well.
Right. If it doesn't, that might, either of those might bother an individuals, but possibly you may want to keep those things available to people in your class. Yeah, like right now, even just talking this much, I'm like feeling like I'm going to hyperventilate.
And it's pressing on my nose because of my glasses.
Yep.
That's another thing.
And one thing is, if I don't, it's fine for right now in terms of just talking.
Yeah.
If I open my mouth, I do lose it off of the chin. But I would say for normal conversation, or and I think even in scene work, it's definitely usable. I think.
Yeah.
I had to play with these straps. On the design that Victoria made, they have adjustable straps, so you can quickly make those changes.
Yeah,
I feel it, and that's one of the things that we also talked about is like how much is just having a mask on going to affect concentration and stamina of your students and yourself. So this is another mask that I just recently got. This is from UTS, and it's a nice mask. You can see it's got a nice curve to it. It doesn't have quite as much curve as Victoria's does. And the other thing is that it doesn't. You can see how much more fabric she's got down here. This is using just the ears, but I find that this particular mask compared to the clear mask, I don't find it as claustrophobic.
This one.
Yeah, this one. I don't know why. Maybe it's because as you can see, this has a lot of foam in it, and but also the thing is that this, which is kind of like half shield, half mask,
yes,
you don't get the seal here anywhere as well as the cloth masks. But also because there's a seal, it's the breathability is about the same. I'm still feeling a little like I can't breathe. This has that same problem again. If I open my mouth, it will just come right off my nose. But I did find that if I let it ride on my chin, actually I can let it ride right under, it seals. I don't know if you can see that. It seals pretty well. So I don't feel like I'm losing any the benefit of the mask if I actually let it go just under my mouth. And that really takes care of that problem. Now I pretty much have full facial expression with this mask on. So I kind of like this one. Like I said, I think, oh, well, I know I've got a pretty good seal because I just sucked in and the whole mask like
Oh,
sucked
yes.
in. And the fog is just not a problem. I mean, I really
I'm
have to
going to
work
try
the
this
fog out.
one.
What's that?
I'm going to order this mask.
Yeah, I really like it. Like I said, now I think Victoria's will, because she has the added fabric down there,
Yeah,
is going to work really well. Yeah, so I'm actually providing one of Victoria's masks. Well, our department is just going to pay for them for our
great.
students that need them. And then I went and bought these guys because I think I got a box of 24. So
Yes.
I'm going to give my
Yeah.
students a couple of options and just let them ultimately use what's best. And then when they're just observing, they can just wear a regular mask because I think they're a little easier to breathe in. So I'm just going to have them use these types of masks when we really need to see each other. At least that's my.
I did have the university purchase the face shields with the drop cloths for all my acting students just to see how that will work, since that's something that they'll pay for.
Is
But I
that
am,
design out there, Hillary? Like,
excuse me?
is that design out there of how those masks were adapted?
You mean out there in the world?
Well, yeah. I mean, so your school has found a way to make those masks, those shields, work more like masks
Yes.
right. So
But they're still going to be, it doesn't have the suction on the side. It just covers the neck. It looks like a beekeeper's.
Okay, so all they've done is just basically like glued fabric to the bottom of it. Gotcha. Okay, I wasn't sure if there was something more complex to that. Okay.
David, something I've been thinking about a lot is how to give students mask breaks. And maybe even put that in the syllabus.
Yep.
And is there an area if they have to leave the room to do that?
Yep, that's something that we can add. We'll have to add that for our things to think about, because that's a great idea. Yeah, and just thinking about that, Hillary, a lot of what we have to do is be prepared for these curveballs that we've just never really had to deal with, or at least not on the scale. I mean, we've always had students that have had to leave the room for any number of reasons. But now we really have to add, they need to leave the room so they can go out and breathe.
Yes. We're laughing, but that's
true. You
true.
have to be prepared for it. Well, anyway, so Hillary and I compiled a list. You can see we'll continue to compile it of just some things that we all need to be thinking about. You're probably thinking about these things anyway, but we just thought, why don't we get this down in writing in case there's something that you hadn't thought about. So I know, like for me, my absentee policy has always been pretty straightforward. You've got 2 absences.
Yes.
No questions asked. After that, your grade starts to go down. Of course,
Mine too.
Yep. And now between students who may be watching from home for any number of reasons, now I have to make sure that my policy says, if you are at home, you must have your camera on at all times. In other words, for me, the absentee policy in some ways hasn't changed if you're watching at home or if you're in the classroom. But the one thing that has changed is I always had in mind, it's the way we think as theater people. It's like, if you've got something that's supposed to go up in class on such and such a date, you have to be there. And if you are not there, then you need to be calling me from your hospital bed. Now, all of us in theater, that's hard, that we tend to be oriented that way.
We are.
coming to grips with saying like that's old school thinking, and we have to let go of that. So I'm just prepared that on any day, not to any fault of the students, they may not be able to be there because they're running a temperature or they have a sniffly nose, and for the betterment of all of us, they got to stay home. So I'm really going to have to be super, super flexible, even on a day-to-day class, because everything I may have planned for that day can easily be gone because, two of the students of the two scenes that were supposed to go that day, can't be there.
David, one colleague of mine in the math department recommended that we have for our school an attendance module that for student registration, it's called SAS, where we can put into the module if our students have attended, and then if they're absent, isn't an excused absence or an unexcused absence. And one thing that my colleague was saying is that she's going to let all the students know that each absence is going to, their attendance and absences are going to be recorded and sent directly to the registrar. So if it's excused, great. But if it's unexcused, then that unexcused absence counts against your participation grade.
Great. Yeah, and all of these rules, and you might want to, our department, I don't know if it's the same for you, Hill, but we've debated whether or not we should have some sort of blanket policy across all of our classes. But even still, that's a little bit tricky because, the acting class is just not the same as the playwriting class, et cetera. But, just making sure that your COVID protocol is just clearly articulated in your syllabus. You may have already done this. I know for me, I've already contacted the people in my performance-based classes.
Good.
Yeah, just to say, look, this is what it's going to look like. And also if you are, because we have some students, because students don't have to be on campus at all. And I did want to make sure that students that weren't going to come on campus did not, they just need to take my acting class at a different time. Because they're just not going to be able to get what they need to get out of the class. So anyway, at this point, that was something we put on a month ago, and it may be too late for that at this point.
I loved what Jim Elliott in our Divas group had talked about, the pre-production meeting. I'm definitely going to do one once the semester starts, because I'm going to be front loading my first few weeks face-to-face for ensemble building, and then going to start testing out Zoom before I start doing part of the class online. Oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. I really lost my train of thought. It will come back to me. You continue. Right.
Well, and a lot of these things we've already sort of touched upon.
Yeah.
Having to just I know, like in my syllabus right now, I normally I pack it within an inch of its life, and hope to God I don't lose a day for a snow day or something like that.
Yes.
Maybe I might have a class or two of breathing room. I've never left this much breathing room, but I feel like I've got to, because I have no idea with what efficiency this is going to go forward. So just factoring that in myself. Coming up, we've talked about masks, and in my classes right now, there's not a lot of people using the same props. And there are a couple of things, and again, I'm just kind of getting ready on the wipe down for that. I don't think that's going to be a huge big thing. If you are planning, and this may be a little bit more for them, whether you're hybriding or more online, but exactly what your recording expectations are, make sure that that's articulated in your syllabus. Like I said, all of us, I'm sure, are having to deal with different timelines for how we're operating, because we're going to be shut down. Like we're done with face-to-face classes November 20th, I think, just before Thanksgiving. And then we still have classes that go on for 2.5 weeks after that. but not face to face. Timing wise with acting, it's terrible.
Yeah, so what our school decided is that after Thanksgiving, we are all remote,
Yeah.
but only 1 week after Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Oh, that would be
But
bad.
instead we've lost Labor Day and fall break in order to end a week early in December. So what I'm thinking of doing is having the final project be a scene on Zoom and actually start having more classes remotely leading up to that point.
Great. Well, and also everybody might want to keep in mind at the virtual guest artist program,
Yes.
especially for like if you have that 3 or 4 classes afterwards that have to be fully online, might be a perfect opportunity to bring in a guest artist to run a Zoom class in their specialty. Hillary came to my acting 3 class last year to do a workshop on comedy improvisation, and
so I'm available.
Like, yeah. So there's like 57 workshops available, and you can get that through the ATHA website.
David, I brought in 3 of those virtual artists to my class in the spring, and students mentioned in their evaluations that that was one of their favorite parts.
Oh, great.
Of the second part of the semester. And actually, I've been thinking about the virtual guest artist program as an emergency as well. If I am not just quarantined, but if I'm sick, can I plan ahead of time which artists are ready to go?
Yep. That's right. Or like even, there might, like I said, in a case of an emergency, I mean, you can always check somebody really quick and see if they happen to be even available that day. I mean, that's not the best of all possible worlds, but I can imagine all of a sudden, realizing that I can't be on campus because I have to quarantine. And all of a sudden I've got to try a plan B. But I would say that whatever the case, have your plan Bs ready to go. Both for if what you plan to do with your students you can't do because that student can't be there, or if you can't be there. So a lot to think about.
David, here's a question I've been wanting to ask you since we met before. Do you actually have any emergency videos or anything planned already?
No, I haven't. As a matter of fact, I made the conscious decision to not even try to hammer out my syllabus until after August 1st. Because I wanted to make sure we were actually kind of doing this, because our administration is still kind of reserved August 3rd as the like we could still change our mind. So I'm just now setting forth my syllabus, but but I'm going to start to get together a bunch of kind of single class lessons, and just be ready to go with them. So they're sort of self-standing. They're not reliant on anything that went before it necessarily.
Yes.
So that's kind of thing. Yeah, really trying to make them, sort of like episodic acting class. It can stand on its own, but it can still get plugged into the rest of the course.
And then what are you going to record that on?
You know what? Right now, we've got a couple of different recording methods at UNH. But I am finding that, Zoom is as quick and accessible a thing as anything, because you can just record it and then just make that link, put it onto the cloud and make it available to the students. So it's kind of fast and efficient. It's a little bit limited. So if you want to do something more fancy, or you want to be able to do editing or things like that, that's not necessarily the avenue to go. But if you want to go, quick and dirty,
That's what I've done. So good.
Yeah.
All right.
Of course, everybody, this is kind of old.
We covered some of these already.
Yep. So, but I did like this idea of I think you had mentioned it, like doing your warm-ups outside and then moving inside. That's a great idea. And I think everybody's been sort of looking at what you probably know at this point, whether you're doing the split in half kind of thing. At the time, that was kind of a new and novel idea. We talked a little bit about how can you create some sort of way where the actors can sort of recalibrate themselves to proximity. You know, the best example I can think of is like, if you know, I remember doing like the scene from All Wilderness with the Eugene O'Neill character as a young guy, and, you know, the girl that he's madly in love with, who he wants to kiss. And, you know, sort of getting the actors, you know, then what I think that takes place around 1910 or 20, somewhere around there. I guess probably 1910. And just getting the students to recognize that, like, to kiss a hand in this time period, you know, like, what is its equivalent to today? And, you know, they got that, they understood it, and it, you know, really elevated what was happening. So I think if we kind of take that same idea to proximity, but also to different ways of creating something that at least gives a sensation of touch. So maybe if you do have a kiss, that like kind of going back to the idea of what you can safely touch, maybe it's their shoulder, and you endow that physical motion as a kiss. And I think the students will respond to it, and I think they'll still get that same sort of emotional response that you're hoping that they'll get. So anyway, starting to find different substitutes for what, you know, for what we can't do, and then just think about how powerful that's going to be when they can touch. You know, in some ways, it, you know, might really strengthen some aspects of their acting. And then, yeah, we've talked about this before, sort of reviewing your scenes into what might accommodate the current situation the best. So at this point, I don't think I'm gonna, I feel pretty good about coming up with the substitutes. So right now, I think I'm gonna try to stick with a lot of the scenes that I like to use because they're just such good scenes.
Okay, good. I'm not sure yet for the final project. I still think I want to work with some scenes written for Zoom, as long as they have really good, really clear conflict, opposing objectives, subtext, good variety of tactics. One thing I wanted to add to what you were saying before about creating that sense of intimacy, though through, you know, we're far apart, is Valerie Clayman Pye is in our Divas working group, and she has a chapter in her book on Shakespeare's Globe called Elliptical Energy, which is kind of really working with eye contact in a theater in the round situation. I haven't worked with this yet, but I'm going to be investigating it this fall. And so if you have a mirror, if you have mirrors in your classroom, this could work well for the exercise or getting handheld mirrors. But that's in Valerie Clayman Pye's book. And this is a perfect opportunity to try it, elliptical energy.
So, which kind of gets us to our final slide in our little brainstorming, which is just kind of a sort of a plea to everybody. That the more we can share with each other, the better, whether, as Hillary just did, like with exercises and things that we've come up, that we've tried, that we have adapted, the more we can share this, the better. Again, if we want to share scene work ideas, also for those of you that are going to be going more online, what scene work really lends itself well to the Zoom platform. Of course, we all know that there's the Zoom plays and but even among those plays, which are you finding really strong and usable, and then all the different ways that you're doing your modifications. So hopefully we'll all, you know, stay together, stick together, help each other out, and we will all be able to move our students forward.
This has been such a wonderful process working with you, David, and with the Divas, and I know we'll be continuing these conversations, and we'll be kind of exciting to come back maybe in December and share how we got through all this and what became our best practices.
It's just been a joy working with you as well, Hillary, and the whole Diva group, and you know, we're always here and available to help in any way we can, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.